The air in the trailer was thick with the scent of hairspray and nervous energy, a familiar perfume that had defined most of Uma Thurman's adult life. It was the late 90s, a dizzying, incandescent period where she wasn't just a star, she was a celestial event. After Pulp Fiction, her face was plastered everywhere, an icon of cool, dangerous glamour. The phone never stopped ringing, scripts piled up like snowdrifts, and money, more money than a girl from Amherst, Massachusetts, could ever have imagined, was pouring into her life with the force of a fire hose. It was thrilling, and it was terrifying. With every seven-figure paycheck came a tidal wave of complexity, taxes, investments, entities, and an endless parade of people with their hands out, all smiling, all promising to make her life easier, to make her richer. In this glittering chaos, she craved an anchor, a grown-up, someone who could navigate the treacherous financial waters while she focused on her art, on hitting her marks, on remembering her lines. That's when she met Ken Starr. Not the prosecutor, but the other Ken Starr, the one who moved through the elite circles of New York and Hollywood with the quiet confidence of a man who belonged. He wasn't some slick, fast-talking hustler. He was understated, almost professorial, with a reassuring calm that seemed to lower the temperature in any room he entered. He was introduced through a trusted friend, the best kind of referral, and from their first meeting, he exuded an aura of unimpeachable integrity. He spoke of wealth preservation, of long-term strategy, of creating a financial fortress that would protect her and her family for generations. He wasn't just selling a service, he was offering peace of mind. To Uma, and to a whole constellation of stars he'd collected, legends like Martin Scorsese and Al Pacino, Starr became more than a financial advisor. He became a confidant, a gatekeeper. He understood the bizarre reality of their lives, the isolation that came with global fame. He knew their kids' names, their vacation plans, their anxieties about a fickle industry. He made house calls. He took care of everything, from paying the bills to structuring massive film deals. He made the intimidating world of high finance feel simple, safe. "You just do what you do best," he'd say, with a paternal smile. "Let me worry about the numbers." And she did. She handed him the keys to her financial kingdom, believing she had found that rarest of Hollywood commodities, a truly loyal friend. The trust wasn't built overnight. It was forged over years of steady, reliable service. He set up her accounts, her corporations, her charitable foundation. He was meticulous. The monthly statements always arrived on time. Thick sheaves of paper filled with numbers and charts that looked impressively complex, a testament to the sophisticated work being done on her behalf. She'd glance at the bottom line, see the numbers going up, and file it away with a sigh of relief. He was handling it. Ken was in control. This belief became a bedrock of her life, allowing her to pour her energy into her grueling work, into raising her children, into navigating the public eye. The world knew her as the bride, a sword-wielding force of nature. But in her private life, she had willingly, gratefully, ceded control of her future to the quiet, unassuming man who had promised to protect it. She had no idea she was placing her life's work into the hands of a master illusionist, a man who saw her not as a client or a friend, but as a mark. Part 2. The Gilded Web. The betrayal didn't begin with a bang. It started with a whisper, a quiet siphoning of funds so subtle, it was imperceptible on the glossy surface of Uma's life. Ken Starr was a patient predator. For years, he played the part of the faithful steward, building a foundation of trust that was as solid as granite. But beneath the surface, his own life was a maelstrom of greed and desperate ambition. He craved a place at the table, not just as a servant to the rich and famous, but as one of them. And he was willing to use their money to buy his seat. The first transfers were small, disguised as management fees or investments in bland-sounding real estate ventures. He was a master of the mundane, using the sheer boredom of financial paperwork as a shield. He knew his celebrity clients were artists, thinkers, dreamers. The last thing they wanted to do was spend a weekend poring over spreadsheets and prospectuses. They trusted him to do that for them. That was his product. That was his genius. Then his schemes grew bolder. He began recommending investments that were, in reality, his own pet projects. He poured millions of his clients' dollars into a company that manufactured pole dancing poles. He became the secret money behind a high-end condominium development for his third wife, a former stripper. He funneled a fortune into Scores, the infamous New York Gentlemen's Club, believing he could transform it into a global brand. He was building his own empire with other people's money, treating their life savings like his personal venture capital fund. For Uma, one of the most significant diversions was into a company called Windy Power. It sounded plausible, even responsible, a green energy investment. Starr presented it as a safe, forward-thinking move. In reality, he controlled the company, and he was using her $7 million investment as a slush fund, paying for his lavish lifestyle, a multi-million-dollar Upper East Side apartment with a 1,500-square-foot terrace, extravagant parties, and hefty political donations to keep him connected and influential. Occasionally, a sliver of doubt would pierce through Uma's busy life. An unfamiliar company name on a statement, a fee that seemed a little high. She'd call his office, and either Starr himself or one of his impeccably trained lieutenants would have a smooth, plausible explanation ready. The language was always baffling, a word salad of leveraged assets, capital calls, and tax-advantaged structures. The conversation would inevitably end with her feeling slightly foolish for questioning him, reassured that he was the expert. He was a master at making his victims feel like they were the ones who were confused, not that he was the one being deceptive. He was counting on their reluctance to appear ignorant about the very money they had earned. The tipping point, the moment the gilded web began to tremble, came not from a single client, but from the cumulative weight of his lies. His Ponzi-like scheme required a constant infusion of new cash to pay off earlier investors and maintain the illusion of success. But the 2008 financial crisis hit, and the river of money slowed to a trickle. Suddenly, the returns he had promised weren't materializing. New clients were scarce. Old clients started asking for their money. The phantom profits and fake investments could no longer be sustained. An attorney for another elderly client who had been with Starr for decades noticed a series of highly irregular, multi-million-dollar transfers. He started digging. He made a phone call to federal investigators. The whisper had become a shout, and the intricate, glittering web Ken Starr had spent a decade weaving was about to be torn apart. Part 3. The Collapse of a Kingdom. The news came to Uma not in a dramatic, face-to-face confrontation, but in a sterile, impersonal phone call from her lawyer. The words were a blur of legalese, federal investigation, fraud, receivership, but the meaning was brutally clear. Ken Starr, the man she had trusted with everything, the quiet guardian of her financial life, was a thief. The ground beneath her feet seemed to dissolve. It was a visceral, sickening feeling, a profound sense of violation that went far beyond the money. It was the chilling realization that a relationship she believed was built on loyalty and friendship was a meticulously crafted lie. Every conversation, every piece of advice, every reassuring smile had been part of a long con. The days that followed were a surreal nightmare. Investigators and forensic accountants descended upon Starr's life's work, peeling back the layers of deception. What they uncovered was staggering. It wasn't just a few bad investments. It was a systematic, decade-long plunder. He had stolen at least $33 million from a client list that read like a Hollywood power ranking. Sylvester Stallone, Wesley Snipes, the estate of the legendary journalist Mike Wallace. He had advised elderly clients to mortgage their homes to give him more money to invest, then use the funds to pay his American Express bill. He had forged signatures, created fake companies, and lied with the ease of a pathological master. For Uma, the specifics were gut-wrenching. The green energy company, the real estate deals, it was all a sham. He had simply taken her money. The collapse of Starr's kingdom was swift and brutal. On a May morning in 2010, federal agents arrested him at his sprawling Manhattan office. The man who had cultivated an image of quiet power and sophistication was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief. The story exploded across the media landscape. Celebrity financial advisor, a Ponzi schemer, the headline screamed. Uma's name was everywhere. The betrayal wasn't just a private pain, it was now a public spectacle. Reporters camped outside her home. Every detail of her finances, her trust, her victimization, was dissected on cable news and splashed across the pages of tabloids. The humiliation was immense. In a world where image is everything, she had been made to look like a fool. Navigating the legal system was a cold, disorienting ordeal. The personal sense of betrayal had to be translated into the rigid language of criminal charges: wire fraud, investment advisor fraud, money laundering. She was now a victim, a name on a long list in a federal indictment. She had to provide testimony, sign affidavits, and recount the details of her relationship with Starr to teams of impassive lawyers and FBI agents. It was a process that forced her to relive the deception in excruciating detail, to confront just how completely she had been duped. The man she once considered a friend was now the defendant. The fortress he had promised to build for her had been a prison of lies, and the architect himself was revealed to be nothing more than a common crook in a bespoke suit. Part 4. Scars and Resilience. The trial of Kenneth Starr was a somber affair, a public autopsy of trust and greed. In the cold, wood-paneled courtroom, the full scope of his deception was laid bare. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence: forged documents, incriminating emails, and a tangled web of bank transfers that showed the clear path of his client's money into his own pockets. He had used their fortunes to fund a life of obscene luxury, to purchase political influence, and to prop up his own ego. Starr, who had once moved with such quiet confidence among the powerful, now sat hunched at the defense table, a diminished figure facing the consequences of his double life. His defense was weak, a desperate attempt to portray himself as a victim of the market, a man whose ambitious investments had simply gone south. But the evidence was overwhelming. He wasn't an unlucky investor. He was a predator. Uma did not have to testify in person, but her presence was felt throughout the proceedings. Her name, and the names of the other Starrs, were a constant reminder of the audacity of Starr's crimes. This wasn't just about numbers on a page. It was about the violation of deeply personal relationships. In 2011, Starr was sentenced to 7.5 years in federal prison. The judge called his crimes breathtakingly deceitful. For the victims, it was a moment of legal closure, a confirmation that what had happened was real, and it was a crime. Justice, in its formal, procedural way, had been served. But the sentence couldn't undo the damage. It couldn't restore the lost years, the peace of mind that had been stolen, or the deeply ingrained sense of trust that had been shattered. In the years that followed, Uma Thurman spoke little of the ordeal, but the experience left an indelible scar. She recovered some of her money through the bankruptcy proceedings, but the real recovery was far more complex. How do you learn to trust again when someone so close to you, someone who was meant to be your protector, turns out to be your biggest threat? The world of a celebrity is already a house of mirrors, where sincerity is a rare and precious thing. The Starr betrayal amplified that reality to a terrifying degree. It forced her to erect higher walls, to become more guarded, to view every new relationship through a lens of suspicion. The easy, open trust she had once placed in a fatherly advisor was gone forever, a casualty of his greed. Her story became a cautionary tale in Hollywood, a stark reminder of the unique vulnerabilities that come with fame. It highlighted a dark symbiosis where the immense wealth and creative focus of artists can attract sophisticated predators who exploit their need for a trusted inner circle. Kenneth Starr wasn't a monster who sprang from the shadows. He was a man who was welcomed in, who built his criminal enterprise on handshakes and friendly advice. Ultimately, Uma Thurman's resilience became the final chapter of the story. She continued to work, to create, to raise her family. She moved forward, a little wiser, a little warier. She remained an icon, but one whose luminous public image now concealed a hard-won lesson: that in the glittering, intoxicating world of Hollywood, the most dangerous illusions are not the ones created on screen, but the ones that whisper promises of loyalty in your ear.